Hi, I have been planning to do these Bible studies online, and I have a couple people who are going to study with me, and what we're going to do is study the entire book of Genesis online. And so we'll do about like 20 minutes at a time each week, and around a chapter, give and take, each time too. So hopefully some of you will join us, and it's just going to be like a read and discussion time. And then if someone wants to talk more, they could message me or comment below. So anyway, I'm going to get right into it. The Bible that I'm going to read from is the New American Standard Bible. It's a really literal translation, and it's one of my favorite translations. So it's like a word by word translation. And I know a lot of people, they start to study Genesis, but they don't stick it out. You know, it might seem like a tedious chore, but really it should be light and fun and just kind of like a thing that people enjoy doing, and not making it into some kind of tedious chore. So anyway, I hope some of you will study with us. So Genesis, most people think, was written by Moses. And so these events must have been passed down. But this is the Word of God, so it's Holy Spirit inspired. So I'm going to start reading right at the beginning in chapter 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning one day. And so even just day one that God started creating the world, there was a lot going on. You get the picture of this just formless void, but there's water everywhere, and there's darkness everywhere. And so the first thing that God did was create light. And he did that through speaking. He said, "Let there be light," and light appeared. And notice he hasn't created like stars or sun or moon yet, but light has already appeared just at his spoken word. And he literally created a day on the first day. So he created the first day, and he created, he separated this light from this darkness. So there was a morning and an evening and one day. So that's kind of what happened. A day was the first thing he created, and by separating day and light. Let me go on to verse 6. Then God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." God made the expanse and separated the waters which were below the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse, and it was so. God called the expanse heaven, and there was evening and there was morning, a second day. This is one of my favorite parts of what he did. It's just really interesting to me, and just by casual reading, someone might just skip over the importance of it. But again, picture all the water's everywhere, and God has created a day, but now he's going to do something new. So he's going to separate this water into two different parts, basically. He pushes water above, so there's water above, and he pushes water below. In between, there's this expanse, and that expanse is the sky. So basically, on day 2, God created the sky. But you have to think of it differently than today. We see, like if you live near water, you would see that water is below. You know, it's on the surface of the earth, but there's water above at the beginning. And so when God is first creating the world, you have to picture all this water above. And really understanding that helps people understand different parts of the Bible as they read that. It's really a very important detail that there was water above, and in between is that sky. All right, let me go to where are we at? Verse 9. Then God said, "Let the waters below the heavens be gathered into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of the waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees on the earth bearing fruit after their kind, with seed in them. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed after their kind, and trees bearing fruit seed in them after their kind. And God saw that it was good. There was evening and there was morning, a third day. So each day he has a task that he wants to do, and he finishes it up, observes it, notices it's good, and then that day is over. And there's evening and there's morning the next day. So on day 3, dry land actually appears, and God speaks again. He says, let the waters below the heavens be gathered into one place. So the waters all move into one place, cease, and dry land appears. And then after that, he speaks again, and vegetation comes up. And this creation that he did with the vegetation, the plants, is unique in that it's able to reproduce. So the plants have seed after their own kind. So they're going to produce plants. Now, today we look at different varieties of plants like potatoes and things like that. There's all these different varieties of potatoes. But whatever kind of plants God had at the beginning, the plants of today came from that. So I don't really know how new varieties come about, the science behind that, but the plants at the beginning had whatever it was required within them to bring about plants throughout the generations. So let's go to verse 14. Then God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth. And it was so. God made the 2 great lights, the greater light to govern the day, and the lesser light to govern the night. He made the stars also. God placed them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, and to govern the day and the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. There was evening and there was morning, a 4th day. So God is creating on the 4th day all these lights. He already created light on day 1 just by his speaking it out. It came, and that caused a day to happen. But you get the impression here that he's creating time, in a sense, in that, you know, these lights that he's creating, the sun, moon, and stars, they'll have a role to play in as far as days and weeks and months and years. And so he's creating seasons and times. Now, at the beginning, the climate was perfect, but there were obviously still seasons. And I don't know how our seasons today different from the seasons at the beginning. But anyway, we know that there were seasons in his mind and God's mind from the very beginning. It's in verse, where is that? He tells us why he created these lights. Because remember, he didn't need the sun, moon, and stars to have light. He had light on day 1 when he just spoke. So in verse 14, it says that there are reasons that he created lights. And the reasons listed are seasons, days, and years. And then in verse 15, it says, and to be lights in the expanse of the heavens. So the first reason he lists is signs. And there's a sign that comes to my mind when I think of this. God knew that stars would be signs of different things throughout generations to come. One of the signs that comes to my mind is when Jesus was born and the wise men saw a star in the sky that would eventually lead them to the Christ child whom they were seeking. So it was a sign to them. And God knew from the very beginning it would be a sign to them. That's one of the reasons he created the stars, was for signs. Now, the wise men didn't show up to the manger that night of Jesus' birth. They showed up later, but they did follow a star to find him, and they eventually found him by following that star. Anyway, that's the thing that I think of. Let's go to verse 20. Then God said, let the waters teem with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth in the open expanse of the heavens. God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarmed after their kind, and every winged bird after its kind, and God saw that it was good. God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth." There was evening and there was morning, a fifth day. So day 5, God is finally creating creatures, and he starts with creatures that swim and creatures that fly. And in Genesis chapter 1, we're getting a general overview of what God's doing. We're going to get a little bit more detail in chapter 2. So right now we're just getting some detail. And of course, every time God starts the day, he starts by speaking. And so he speaks, "Let the waters teem with swarms of living creatures," and so on. But God also forms these animals. A lot of people I've heard teach on Genesis will say, "Oh, God just spoke and these creatures came." But really, he did form them, because later we'll read that he formed them. In chapter 1, it's not going into that much detail. So it talks about him speaking, but it doesn't list the detail that he did form them. So we will read that later. But this is the first time that it mentions him blessing what he created that day. I think it's the first time. And he blesses these creatures that he made, and he wants them to reproduce. Again, this is a creation that reproduces. And there's all kinds of theories about Genesis. I don't want to get into them at all. But they're certainly out there. There's all kinds of ideas about God's creation that aren't really biblical. So I think it's important to stick to the text, but you could message me about anything that you were curious about. But I've taken some creation science classes, and I picture, like for example, in one of the classes, the scientist was talking about all the different dog breeds that are popular today, not just domestic dog breeds, but wild dogs as well. And he had this big chart, and there were all these dog breeds. But he explained that if we quit breeding dogs the way we are and change things, that we would get rid of all these current dog breeds and have all new dog breeds. So when I picture God creating, and I guess we haven't even gotten to land animals yet, so that wasn't a very good example. But when I picture God, let's go to a bird. When I picture God creating, storks, I picture like 2 storks. And out of those storks, all the storks of the world came, including different breeds. But we'll get to that too when we talk about land animals, which is next. Now, God wanted them to fill the world. So he wants them to reproduce. Let's go to verse 24. Then God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures after their kind, cattle and creeping things, and beasts of the earth after their kind." And it was so. God made the beasts of the earth after their kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creeps on the ground after its kind. And God saw that it was good. So God, now we're talking about land creatures, and I picture 2 dogs that God created. So anyway, it's just something to think about. And he created all the land animals on this day. And within their DNA, all the future generations were to come. So when he created dogs, he knew all the future dogs that would come from those dogs that he created. And it's almost like he pre-created in a way, even though he knits us together in our mother's womb, he also knew before the beginning of the world, he knew us. He knew that he was going to create us. And he put us within Adam and Eve, us humans, within Adam and Eve. He put the DNA of me into Adam and Eve. And so it's almost like a pre-creation, and it just keeps reproducing. So let's go to verse 26. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky and over every living thing that moves on the earth. This again doesn't go into a lot of detail because again God spoke, and it does say that God made us, which implies he formed us. But we will read more about that in chapter 2. And he creates mankind, and he has a purpose in doing this. Mankind is going to rule over the rest of the creation. They're going to rule over the fish and the creatures and the birds of the sky and every living thing. So when he created mankind, he created them to rule, both male and female. And that's, we'll talk about it more later, but although there are powerful women who rule today, over time, men began to rule more. But at the beginning, it wasn't really like that. Mankind, men and women, were equally ruling over all creation. Is there anything else I wanted to add them? He blessed that creation too. Oh, verse 27, God created man in his own image. So there's more than one way to look at this. God rules, and he made mankind to rule. But God is a triune being. There's Father, Son, and Spirit. And I won't get too much into it, but they are one. So if someone is, like when Jesus said, those who have seen me have seen the Father. So basically, Jesus, when he came to earth, he is called the Son of God, but he was also God. He was God who came to earth. And so the Father, Son, and Spirit are one. And God is a triune being. And it's implied throughout the Bible. And humans are triune beings as well. So we have a spirit, a mind, and a body. And so we are triune beings as well, and we're made in God's image. Let me go to verse 29. Then God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the surface of all the earth, and every tree which has fruit yielding seed, it shall be food for you. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the sky, and to every living thing that moves on the earth which has life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. This is really important, and it's important to understanding the rest of the scriptures, really. And yet, most people don't pick up on it as they do a casual reading. So, when God told Adam and Eve what to eat, he told them to eat plants. And when he told all the creatures, regardless of what kind of creature it was, what to eat, he told them to eat plants. The food was vegetation. So this very first day that God created, or this very first week, it was day 6 that he created these land creatures and humans. He told them what to eat, and it was not other animals. So people and animals were all vegetarian at the beginning. And I think people forget that. They don't notice it as they're reading it. But it really is very important to know that. It's a very key detail. And like I said before, it's just really easy to skip over some of these details thinking they're not important when they're very key details. So even, I don't know what the cats first looked like that God created, but even like a cat would not chase after a mouse. It just wasn't like that. So even creatures like that survived on plants at the very beginning. And really, they would have known nothing else. They would have known nothing else. So verse 31, God saw all that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, a 6th day. So this first little study, it would be good if you could like read it again or watch it again, just because you want it to stick. So if you're not used to reading the scriptures, it's good to just think about it, discuss it, maybe watch it again or read it again. Or if you have an audio Bible, you could probably download a free audio Bible somewhere and you could listen to it again, because there's so much more detail than you might have thought and that you would want to remember. So I wanted to pull out 3 points that I think are important to keep in mind. And you could write them down, or you might come up with points of your own that you think are important. But these are things I would think that you can meditate on. Number 1, God's words have creative power. And because we are made in his image, so do ours. So before God would create anything, he would speak it out, like let there be light, and there was light. And really with day one, you get the impression that's all he did was speak out. Now, we're made in God's image, so our words also have creative power. So the things we say have power. And we have to keep that in mind as we're speaking, because we all say things we probably shouldn't say, or we say things that might bring something about. And we might not want to bring that something about. So, we need to watch, and we all say stuff we shouldn't say, but it's just something to keep in mind. Maybe I'll go into it more next time, but let's read number 1 again. God's words have creative power, and because we are made in his image, so do ours. And then number 2, God created humans, male and female, and intended for them to rule over his creation. Okay, number 2 again. God created humans, male and female, and intended for them to rule over his creation. God gave a lot of power to humans in the very beginning, and I think it's really important to keep that in mind. Now, if you have power, you can do what you want with it. So keep that in mind. Number 3, God gave humans and animals plants for food. That's just such an important thing to remember. God gave humans and animals plants for food. We don't just eat plants these days, but at the beginning, God gave humans and animals plants for food. Okay, I hope you join me next time.